To celebrate the release of the Klonoa Phantom Reverie series on pretty much every modern platform, I decided to take a brief look at the original PS1 release of Klonoa, Door to Phantomile. But, in typical Uncle Charles fashion, I've managed to miss the boat slightly, as the remasters actually came out about a week ago. Whoops. Now I'll be honest, Klonoa for the most part is just a very solidly put together 2D platformer. What you see is absolutely what you get with the game. The abilities you have at the start of the game are the same abilities you'll have by the end. You just need to make sure you use them better, as the game does have a nice little difficulty curve. The game is not the most challenging thing going, not even slightly. But what Klonoa does have, as cheesy as it sounds, is heart. In spades. But, seeing as Door to Phantomile is, for all intents and purposes, a straightforward platformer, I don't think my usual style of tackling the game level by level and talking about what I thought worked and what didn't wouldn't really be an appropriate approach because, if I'm being honest, I think it's as close to a perfect game as you can get. That's a bold claim for sure, and I'm also sure that you all take my opinion as gospel and are probably surprised by this point of view. But hear me out. Klonoa does absolutely nothing wrong. It's just an absolutely solid experience from start to finish. So my usual approach would just be me saying, I love this, I love that, this was amazing. And while that's glowing praise, I don't really think you need me to say that for the game's full 13 levels. So instead, I'm just going to highlight what Door to Phantomile does well across the whole game. How Long to Beat has the average length of a playthrough of Door to Phantomile as around 4.5 hours. My footage of my playthrough clocks in at about 3 hours 10 minutes. That's a breezy runtime, and for a lot of people is probably going to border on being too short. I do remember that as a kid, my playthrough was absolutely not that short. Klonoa is an easy game, but that doesn't mean that it's disappointing. Instead, it's just pure, unadulterated fun. So let's talk about something unrelated to the gameplay first. The story. Since the game has just been re-released, I'm not going to talk about the whole thing because you should absolutely take the 4 hours to play it yourself. Set in the land of Phantomile, a world that is powered by dreams, we play as Klonoa. I did try to research to find out exactly what Klonoa is, but it seems like this information doesn't actually exist. To me, he looks a bit like an anthropomorphized rabbit, so that's what I'm going to stick with. Yes, that is Pac-Man on his hat. Door to Phantomile is a Namco game after all. Klonoa lives in Breezegale Village with his grandpa. He's been having dreams about an airship crashing into a nearby mountain, and this does actually come to pass. With his friend, the ring spirit Huepow at his side, he sets off to investigate. Arriving on the mountain, they meet the dark spirit Ghadius, who is searching for a way to turn Phantomile into a world of nightmares. And from there, and I can't stress this enough, follows a mostly upbeat and fun adventure with some heavy-hitting emotional moments. I do remember getting quite upset at parts of the game as a child, so if you're a sensitive soul, have some tissues nearby as you hit the late game. The gameplay itself is a side-scrolling 2.5D platformer, but it's one of, in my opinion, the best looking titles that the PS1 has to offer. I mean, just look at this stuff. It's beautiful. The sprite work is excellent on both Klonoa and his enemies. Just looking back at the footage takes me back to some great times being sat in front of the PS1 when I was a young lad. Klonoa uses 2 buttons, not including the D-pad for movement. He has a jump button and a shoot button. The shoot button has him fire his ring at a short distance, and if it hits an unarmored enemy, that'll cause Klonoa to grab them. The enemy gets inflated, and then Klonoa can either throw them across the screen or throw them downwards for a sweet, sweet double jump. You can also hold the jump button in the air for a short hover. And that's all. That's your entire moveset. Like I said, Klonoa is a super simple game. But because of this, they have some very nicely designed levels that are built around the relatively small kit. I'm a huge fan of this style of design, since when you reach a problem, you know you have the tools to deal with it. Other than one specific room in the penultimate level, it all felt very clear on what I had to do. And that specific problem room was more just me forgetting that I can shoot switches and don't just have to throw enemies into them. Yes, even though I shot those 2 switches at the top of the screen, it didn't occur to me to shoot the switch in the middle, and instead I would wait for an enemy to arrive, and then one of the switches would reset. I'm not a smart man. And let's be honest, it wouldn't be an Uncle Chaz video if I didn't forget some kind of mechanic or interaction and cause myself to get stuck for a bit, would it? There are also, as platformers should have, boss fights. And the ones on offer here are pretty good. Sure, they all boil down to just dodging a boss, picking up an enemy and throwing it at the boss, but they're just so well put together and can be an absolute spectacle to behold. Fighting a boss while on a swinging bridge? Check. Fighting a boss that is riding a giant dreamfish? Check. Fighting a giant personified nightmare engine? Check. And they're always just this great blend of gameplay, visuals and soundtrack that just feels so right. Collectibles wise, there are two major ones on offer. There are gems that are plentiful throughout each level. Collecting 100 of those gives you an extra life. Very nice, because I lost a lot of lives in my playthrough. I do believe that I game over about 6 times. So, yeah, I'm not the best. The other collectible are these symbols. I'm not really sure what to call them. Anyway, each one of those represents somebody you can save in the level. There are 6 per level to find, and if you collect them all, you unlock one final bonus level, which is actually pretty hard and feels like a fitting reward for 100% in the game. Completing that stage unlocks the music box, and oh my lord, let's just talk about the soundtrack for a little bit. Every single track of this game is just a joy to listen to. They absolutely nailed the dreamlike feeling for the soundtrack. It's bangers all the way down in Door to Phantomile. Everything just has this ethereal quality to it, and so many of the tracks from this game and its sequel, Lunatea's Veil, are just burned into my brain. Even some of the sound effects like Klonoa's Manya when he gets hit just bring a smile to my face. And that's what Klonoa's all about for me. It just makes me happy when I play it. There's enough bleakness and misery going on in the world today, and sometimes you just need to escape for a little while. Klonoa is a perfect game for a few hours of escapism, and that's all it needs to be. Did you play Door to Phantomile? Do you plan to? Do you think my assessment of it being perfect's too much? Feel free to leave your thoughts down below in the comments. If you've made it this far, do consider subscribing for more brief looks and hot takes on classic games. I've been your Uncle Chaz, and I'll see you in the next one.